Hi there, my name is Ben Moffitt. I work as a political scientist at Monash University here in Melbourne, Australia. And I want to talk to you about my article, Populism, Visual Technologies, and the Self-Mediation of the People from the 2002 Venezuelan coup to 2021 US Capitol riots, here in the Review of International Studies. So the big question I ask in this article is this: how do populist publics visually represent themselves? And how have shifts in visual technology changed this process over time? There's been an explosion of work in what I've called the visual politics of populism over recent years. Work on the aesthetic dimensions of populism, how populists present themselves visually, a lot of it drawing on the broader literature on visual politics from critical international relations. But a lot of this has come from kind of a top-down approach, focused on uses of imagery by populist leaders, populist parties, and so forth. So there's been less attention paid to how the people of populism depict themselves, I guess, from a more kind of bottom-up approach. So this article tries to address this gap and it tries to do so by theorizing the concept of the visual self-mediation of the people. That is the way the people use visuals to represent and mediate themselves, and tracing its evolution across two emblematic episodes in which contested claims to popular sovereignty were visually enacted. The first is the Venezuelan coup, the short-lived Venezuelan coup from 2002 against Hugo Chavez. And the second is the 2021 US Capitol riots, which I'm sure many people watching this would be familiar with. What I do is undertake a structured diachronic comparison and identify a broader historical shift that goes on within these kind of 2 decades. A shift from the televisual mediation of the people, one that's dependent on elite controlled platforms. And I talk about this in the Venezuelan case, where Chavez's populist publics, to show their support for Chavez, had to basically bang on the doors of television stations, media networks, and beg to have themselves visually mediated by those channels. Fast forward 20 years later or so, and it's a completely different picture. There, we're talking about digitally enabled visual self-mediation, wherein populist publics, in the case of the Capitol riots, were able to broadcast themselves as the people in real time via smartphones, via social media, via live streaming. So something really important goes on here in the shift in the ways that the people can visually represent themselves and who has the agency to do so. So in the paper, I analyze how populist publics visually presented themselves, both aesthetically in terms of the kind of content, I guess, of the visual representations, as well as the role of technologies there. I also talk a bit about the intended audiences for these visual mediations, but also the unintended audiences, specifically in the case of the US Capitol riots, where you couldn't quite control who was watching in terms of picking up, uh, what were crimes at the time, in terms of law enforcement and in terms of media, and the repercussions this had for some of the people who were trying to present themselves as the populist people in that case. In foregrounding this transformation from televisual mediation of the people to the visual self-mediation of the people using digital technologies, I'm trying to contribute to bigger debates. Debates about, yes, visual politics and where that's going, questions about media ecologies, and questions about populism, about how the people can be represented and represent themselves. And there's a bigger question here, I think, about the relationship between political representation and visual representations as well. What I'm trying to do here is illustrate how digital infrastructures have completely reconfigured the visibility, the performativity, and the legitimacy of populist publics in the 21st century. And as a result, I hope this paper will appeal not only to people who are interested in populism and not only people who are interested in visual politics, but as I said, these questions of kind of political legitimacy, political representation, and even comparative politics more generally, how we can think about these changes across different settings, but also different periods. I hope you find something in there to agree with, something to argue against, something to criticize, but I hope you take away something from this paper. And thanks for watching and spending your time with the article.